Hello, welcome to Lockdown Beers. It's still lockdown in 09 or up in Auckland, and hence we're helping them get through that, being part of the team of 5 million. Yes, Auckland, thank you very much for what you're doing and sticking to lockdown laws. Let's get those rules, let's get those numbers down, let's get out of lockdown as soon as possible. Thank you for the majority of people who are behaving themselves. And the rest of us, look, let's appreciate what Auckland is having to go through. They are, a third of the country, I think it is, something like that. So let's not put all those negative comments out there. So today, yes, lockdown beers and rugby chat, a few things. Got Whitelock news. We've got some news on the laws that New Zealand Rugby are bringing in for club and first 15 rugby next year. I've got a Tui beer. And we've also had a Springbok squad announced as well. So lots and lots to chat about. Got about 30 seconds until I can open that beer, and it's 5 o'clock, and people are officially off the clock. You're working from home, folks. So yeah, do remember to log off on time and to wind down at the end of your working day. Yes, we have the Rugby Championship games this weekend. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There we go. Let's open the Tui. Not sponsored, by the way. But if Tui would like to sponsor us, and please feel free to do so. Getting the beer in the glass, leave the gas in the glass, and all that kind of stuff. Looks like I'm on my own today. If you'd like to join in the show, then the link is in Twitter. You can just click on the link and come on screen with me, or you can add comments in the live chat across YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. It's also put out in the podcast if you can't join us on time and want to catch up on the daily news, which is what, let's be honest, we go through each day. Good evening, good afternoon, Simon, who has joined me through YouTube. So let's look at the news for today then. Whitelock will be flying out to Queensland on Friday. And obviously we'll have to go through his 2 weeks of quarantine once he gets there. That means he'll come out on the day of the first Springbok test. So he's targeting clearly the second test as a potential comeback there. Clearly, he's not been having contact training. He's going to have to be training on his own in his hotel room when he does get there. So we've been in lockdown level 4 here most of the time. So yes, he will definitely not be conditioned for contact training. So he says he thinks he'll be a bit of a guinea pig as to how they can reintroduce players, and they'll be trying out some new things. So yes, potentially that test match against the second test match against the Springboks is his next opportunity to be in that. Now, looking at the current All Black squad, and we've talked a little bit about this before, about how inexperienced this squad is. If we just go through those forwards, Amua got 2 caps, Takilaho 2 caps, sure, Dane Coles has he's not actually there, is he? Cody Taylor's got 59 caps. But then you go on into the props. George Bauer just 3, Chula Lomax 8. Lualala, he's one more experienced at 32, etc. So there are a lot of inexperienced players, even amongst the locks. Patrick Tuipulotu's only got 39 caps. And then if you compare that to the Springboks, and the Springboks have named a side for this weekend already, the first team to put out their team. So, looking at that, and I've not gone through and checked this because this is something I just saw on Twitter literally seconds before I clicked live to go on air. But it was saying in there that Mbambi is the least experienced of that starting pack, with 41 test caps. Wow. That gives you an idea as to where this Springbok team is at compared to the other teams. Because if you look at the All Blacks, the only back row forward with more than 14 caps is Ardy Surveyor. Next person is Shannon Frizzell with 40. Actually, he's not there, is he? So the next person actually is Hoskins Institute with 6, or Poppy Lee here, or Jacobson with 6 caps. The difference in experience between this Springbok team and the All Blacks, and also, let's just bring up the Wallabies as well, is pretty big. So you've got to realise that when we're comparing teams that this South African team is at a different stage of its development than the other sides. And again, in that back line, we've got we've got quite a few players. Just going to bring Boa on stream. How are you doing, sir?
Very well, thanks. Lion Red, the working man, blue collar beer. How are you, Paul? I hope all our listeners are well, enjoying cracking a beer. For us, Aucklanders still lower 4. It is what it is. But yeah, no, the Springbok side, interesting. Starting with literally 3 locks, so no surprises there, and no prizes for guessing what type of rugby they're going to be playing. It's going to be well, how can I be polite about this? Lumber yard jacking, so to speak. Lumber yard jacking.
Well, this is a first choice team. There's only 2 players in that starting 15 who are missing. Peter Steph-Toy is injured, and Chesley Colby who's injured, with Mostert coming in and Napimpi. You've got 2 and Cozy. Sorry, you've got 2 very able players coming in there. So look, this is a first choice. This is as strong a side as South Africa can put together. I mean, off the bench, Marks, Nikkei, Koch, Van Straden, Smith, and Weiss, which shows you that they've gone for the 6-2 split on the bench as well. Sure, they've gone for 3 locks, but they're going to replace 6 of that pack, so you can't run them around, expect to get them tied, and then look to make advantage in that last 20 minutes. That won't work. And you got to remember, Peter Steph-Toy is a converted lock, so putting Mostert in there, it's the same game plan. It's not a different game plan. It's what we've seen through the Rugby World Cup. It's not like when Scott Barrett was put in at 6 for the All Blacks, which was then a change to how the team would play. This is first choice team, first choice game plan, and good luck to the Wallabies is all I can say. Really, let's be honest. It's going to be a tough old day for the Wallabies.
Well, look, it is the best available side. And particularly, I one player I have a lot of time for is Mostert. I think he's improved leaps and bounds. One of the best, players going around in the game. And Peter Steph-Toy is probably not going to be missed as much. And obviously, big Vermeulen back at number 8. Colby, I would have loved to have seen him. For me, one of the most, if not the most exciting player in rugby on planet Earth at the moment. So it's a bit of a bummer from a rugby fan's point of view that we don't see Colby. But again, very able substitutes, and of course the very famous bomb squad. The Springbok fans keep going on and harping on about the bomb squad. So yeah, look, they've named their strongest 23 for a very important game. And keep in mind, the Boks have always struggled. They've been very sluggish in Australia whenever they've been on tour. So I think they're kind of guarding against that. And Coach Ninabe and Rassi, who's obviously back home in South Africa, has named the best possible starting weapons to combat what is, a bit of a dubious and checkered record when they've always toured in Australia.
Yeah, let's remember that this will be the first time in, perhaps forever, apart from a Rugby World Cup, where they've played 4 test matches in Australia back to back. They normally fly over, play 1 test match, go to New Zealand, play 1 test match, go home, right? So there's no kind of warm-up games or anything like that. It's off the plane, play a game, on the plane, play a game. This time, they'll be based in Australia for 4 games on the trot. So you'd expect by the 3rd, 4th game, we shouldn't be seeing that travel issue that the Springboks have historically had, because they won't be getting up straight off the plane like they will have done in the past, and should be fine by then. So it's going to be interesting to see. I say that I don't think the Springboks. The reviewer from YouTube tells us that the Springboks haven't won in Australia since 2013. Wow.
Yeah, there you go. So there's always a reason for these statistical patterns, and I don't know why or how, but for some strange reason, probability. There's a good old game called Probabilito. It's a very obscure game for kids, and it's to do with 2 two dices, and it's good old fashioned dumb luck. But with sports, in every sport, there is this bogey venue, like what Perth was for the All Blacks, which they pretty much comprehensively buried last weekend. So the Springboks will be very, very aware of this, and they will try and do everything they can to put that behind. And of course, massive pressure on them. The pressure is squarely on them because they're coming in after beating the British and Irish Lions, and of course, reigning world champions. And the expectations will be high, and this whole showdown against the All Blacks have really been amped up. So before they get to that hurdle, they've got a bit of a bogey against a very average Wallaby side who are pretty much wanting to turn our fortune around, and this is the best opportunity to spring an upset.
Yeah, look, I would be a bit harsh on the Wallabies. For the Springboks, so it's just been pointed out that Mbangdi, with making his 41st cap, is the least experienced or least capped player in that starting pack. You look at Australia's starting pack, and obviously you've got Hooper there, who's got a bunch of caps. But outside of that, you're looking around going, okay, Alan Alatoa, who's missing because obviously on paternity leave, he's got 47. Scott Seo, 68. But apart from that, there's nobody. And Bambi's got more caps as the least capped starting player. He would have more caps. He'll be the second most capped or third most capped player on the Wallabies scrum pack. So look, yes, you can only play who goes out on the pitch, but I think us putting down this this Wallabies side is really is harsh, considering how inexperienced it is and how early in their journey they are. Whereas this Springbok team is obviously this will be its last cycle before it has to have a major overhaul. So it's a different place.
One thing I have to say is, me personally, I would actually heap most of the criticism on the coach and the coaching staff, because the Wallabies, they're playing some very unusual tactics. They're trying to force thrill-a-minute rugby. They're trying to play a game which doesn't suit their skill set, and they've ignored a tool which has worked in little spurts or flashes of brilliance, particularly against All Blacks, which is the kicking game. Now, obviously, with the 50-22 rule coming in, and if you give the All Blacks a sniff, they will put you to the sword. So I was very, very surprised the Wallabies, trying to run the ball from pretty much everywhere in the park, as opposed to try and play the territorial game. So I think against the Boks, that's probably what they want to do. And I'd be very interested to see if the Boks defense can actually hang on to it legally. Now this line speed, and everyone in World Rugby does it. This whole line speed scenario where half the time they're pretty much offside 2020. Look, just a strange old way. The form line clearly doesn't stack up, but having not won since 2013, which is a pretty damning statistic for a reigning world champion outfit. The pressure is firmly on the Boks, and they'll be very, very aware of this. And hey, no pressure. There's no significant expectation on these Wallabies to perform. So it's that perfect little mousetrap, albeit for the Springboks.
It's a definite banana skin for the Springboks. You're quite right. And having just got it's come straight out of MIQ, had about a week's training and straight into the game. So it'll be interesting to see how they go in this first game. But yeah, they're definitely not being complacent about it. Whilst that stat says they've not won there since 2013, I don't think they played there in 2019. They didn't play there in 2020. They couldn't play anywhere in 2020. So and this will be their first game. So look, it's basically, since they've had a good team under Razzie, they've not played in Australia. So there is an element of that stat from 2013 being a bit of you've got sometimes the devil's in the detail around these things.
It is, and also Springboks post Rugby World Cup champion crowning off, their form line has been quite regressive. So if you go back and look at the two World Cups they've won. So again, Paul, I'm just highlighting some statistical patterns. So I mean, this tour might be the nutcracker which breaks the entire fault because it's coming post-COVID, and we've had some delays here and there. And of course, Australia, if they continue with the same tactics, they're not going to get anywhere. They've just got to learn to respect territory. And I see Joshua has made a very valid comment. Yeah, I think Loloseo plays different type of game, and he just doesn't have those skill, particularly the ability to throw wide flat balls, and that's why the Wallabies have been susceptible and been the victim of some intercepts trying to play out wide. So yeah, pretty much they've got to pick someone who's got a really good solid kicking game, who can give them a territorial advantage and get those box to actually cart them from side to side. So I think that will be the winning or losing of the game. If they continue with the same tactics, they'll probably get absolutely blown away, particularly up front, because they just can't seem to contest based on the evidence we've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, Dwayne Vermeulen at 35, it's going to be interesting to see that he still has got it in the legs to keep going at this level. Obviously, we've not seen him since the Rugby World Cup at this level because of injuries. So that's going to be interesting to see if he can keep it up, having not played international rugby for nearly 2 years. So, going to be interesting. Looking forward to the games this weekend. Don't forget, folks, you can join us straight after the final whistle of both games with post-match reaction on Sunday. Yeah, the first or the this weekend it's Sunday, and then the following weekend it's going to be it's going to be on the Saturdays. AK, here we go then. Why didn't Whitelock leave earlier if the baby was delivered almost 2 weeks ago? He could have been available for the first Bok game. He could, but this is the first time he's ever been at home for the birth of one of his children. He's never before had this amount of time with his wife, with the two previous children, and I think he's obviously going to be away now until pretty much Christmas. Or sort of mid to late December. So look, I don't begrudge him having time with his family, especially with all the uncertainty that level 4 has led and has given people.
Yeah, look, I think he's earned it. AK, you gotta understand, these guys, it's not easy staying away from family. They're probably looking at about 80 to 90 days. So I think Whitelock has certainly earned those extra 2 weeks. And, childbirth, around childbirth, you gotta, family is really important. So I think these are probably good practices NZR are trying to instill. And if this happened to any player, we got to put ourselves in that position. If we're in the same position, we have to be a little bit more empathetical. So no qualms there. I think I'm surprised to actually see Whitelock flying over. So, he's probably made a big sacrifice, and he's going to play a very important part because he's been the in-form lock forward and probably one of the most informed forwards for All Black forward pack, and particularly coming up against a box. We will need all that experience to muscle up against the likes of Etzebethan and the rest of the big boys.
Yeah, look, he may not even play in that second test either. Look, he'll only been there for a week. He comes out of quarantine the day of the first test, so he gets to watch the first test with the boys, but he doesn't actually get the. So I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play until Europe, or USA, sorry, because it's the USA before Europe. In that one, they've got to see how well he reacts to that. Also, look, we've had no details about how the birth went, etc. So I think we all believe that the baby and mum have done well, but we don't know, and that's obviously his family privacy. So who knows what has gone on there, and yeah, definitely don't second judge. Oh yeah, so I don't have any problems with him spending that time with his family. We don't know what circumstances and what's been going on there. So yeah, obviously we do wish mum and baby to all the best, and hopefully they are well and progressing well, and obviously wish him the best in his MIQ as well. It's going to be hopefully he gets through plenty of box sets on Netflix. The bit that you've possibly been involved with and knew about before it came out in the news was looking at the law changes for next year that have been announced by New Zealand Rugby. So we have the EDSLVs to make it in the catchy title for the Experimental Domestic Safety Law Variations. That's a mouthful.
It is. It is. Yeah.
And there are a bunch of them. We'll just quickly bring you up to speed of what they are for the secondary school rugby, or what's known as First 15. There are five experimental laws we'll bring in. The first one is the high ball contest. Basically, players are not allowed to jump for the ball, so you're going to have to stay on the ground. That also I will apply obviously for kicks during open play, but I'm guessing also applies for restarts, and meaning you can't lift a player like we often see at restarts. That'll be bring some interesting tactics there for coaches to take in. All tackles must be below the sternum. Obviously, that's to reduce the fact of having heads around each other and head clashes. For scrums, if you have a reset scrummed after when there's been no infringement, the result will be either an uncontested scrum or a free kick to the original team that had it. So basically, to stop us having plenty of resets in there. I guess the only concern there is that a weak scrum might try to deliberately collapse to try and get the reset if they can, whilst making it not look deliberate. But let's hope that that teams don't try to game that, because that's really dangerous. Then there's also offside scrum. So the halfback now, or the scrum half for the defending team, is not allowed to progress beyond the tunnel. And this is so that there is cleaner and quicker ball out the back of a scrum. And then finally, there's one about having a different size pitch. But that's I don't think is really a big. That's really not relevant for most of it. Just those four there, Boa. Happy with those four laws?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Obviously, I've been a huge advocate with my framework, STF Safe Tackle framework, for the last 3 years. So what I would have really liked to have seen, and I think we're probably looking at 2023 is this little piece to the puzzle, basically tackle below the line, and particularly at secondary school in that space, because what I'm actually finding is that coaches, particularly under 14 and above, soon as kids start, showing their growth spurt, encourage players to go into what we call a choke tackle. So what a choke tackle is, basically tackle around here, that shoulder line, because right now the legal tackle height is shoulder, no higher. But the problem is, when you're going at velocity, accidents will happen, and the propensity of shoulder contacting directly to the head is quite significant, as you've seen with cards and penalties right across all levels of competition. So happy with some. I do have a little bit of concern, particularly at the age grades in the secondary schools and below space, where there's no absolute aerial contest, where players must have both feet firmly planted on the ground. So that's to prevent aerial collisions. So things like what happened last week with Jordy sticking out his foot doesn't happen. But that brings another element of danger, which is players, the defenders, coming at red or knots, wanting to take out the guy or the girl catching the ball. So I think that's where we need to have a visual guideline, because if you recall Marika Koroibiti, keep in mind Marika is obviously an elite player. If you get a 20-meter head start, and if you're willing to target that shoulder area, now in this case it's the sternum and below, without actually having a visual guideline, it's actually going to cause more confusion, because knowing how competitive the secondary school space, you can imagine a 1A game where we're getting a penalty where millimeters come into the equation. So this is just, there's going to be some teething from time to time, unless all players are coached to tackle absolutely below the sternum. So we're talking that tummy, belly button zone. But again, these are experimental laws, so we'll wait and see. And also at under 8 levels, they've taken scrums and lineouts completely out of the equation. So it'll be interesting to see how game development, particularly community with the age grades, go on. These laws are probably not going to be absolute and final, because it's going to be an experiment. So I have some laws I absolutely love it. Some could have done better. Some I'm not so sure. So we'll wait and see what the feedback is going to be after this trial.
Yeah, look, and at school levels, look, you've got some first 15s which run nearly as professionally as professional teams, and then you've got other first 15s which are nowhere near that, right? And I think one of the things about the scrum resets is that you are going to get some very differently powered scrums, and actually, this is a good safety thing, and again, under eights. I must say it's not an area of rugby that I've been involved with, but again, removing the scrum and the lineouts isn't a big deal for me, which is why I've concentrated on the first 15, and we'll talk about the club laws in a second on that one. So, on the whole, happy with all of these. Yes, the tackle one below the sternum is going to be interesting as to how you judge that. And with referees, the high ball contest, look, you can time hitting a person hard already with them landing. You don't have to. Just because they're on the ground or jumping, either way they can be hit hard by a legal tackle. So again, I'm not too concerned about that. It makes, obviously, if the person can't jump, it makes it easier for the timing of that tackle. But even so, still not a big. I'm not particularly worried by that.
The worrying factor for me is just a couple of things. Number one, with this no aerial contest, particularly at secondary schools, first 15, we're probably going to take out a skill which is quite advantageous, and which is a real skill you need to learn and execute, particularly the likes of Ben Smith, and we have seen Jordie Barrett. We're taking out a skill where some of these players will be leapfrogging into senior rugby straight after first 15. So that needs to be stage managed, because if you're asking players not to jump up for an aerial contest and then they leapfrog into club rugby where you can do it, that's going to be quite interesting. That's number one. Number two, just to respond to Joshua for his comment on the chat about the choke tackle. Joshua, the problem with the choke tackle is when you go what you call crest on crest or chest on chest, and you dip low and you dip late, there's a high propensity. It's what I call the red zone, where you can have head-on-head contact, and this is one of the biggest contributors to concussion. And we are, the ACC statistics prove it. So instead, I've worked on a framework which is called STF, Safe Tackle Framework. We replaced the choke tackle with what we call the airbag tackle. So what the airbag tackle is you see this here, tackle below the line. You just reduce your entry just underneath the rib cage. So we're actually trying to get on.
He is right. The fact that with the Sonny Bill William offload, we have seen tackles go up to try and stop that offloads, and that has been one of the drivers to it. The other driver to it has been the fact that they're trying to hold players up and cause a maul, and hence get the turnover, which we've seen particularly from Ireland. But it has led to head clashes, yes.
Reading this. But then it is very counterproductive to what the sanctions are, because as you know, right now, any direct contact to the head is a red card. So, from a coaching point of view, you just got to pick and choose. And what's actually happening is, particularly at elite level, they've actually completely discarded that, and they said, look, let's just keep going high. And that's why we're seeing a higher propensity of penalties and cards.
Yep. And I also know that, it's a risk reward thing that, and the coaches decided that. Also, there is definitely an opinion amongst certain pundits that, and it's hard for us to tell because as to how much rugby we can watch, but there's become a difference in the New Zealand, Australia compared to the European officiating as to how strict they are, and that head contact within Australasia is seen as, I say, people who watch both areas is seen as being taken less seriously, and you're allowed to get away with more than you are around the other side. Anyway, more of us to chat about. I just noticed actually here there's a star that actually first 15 subject to organising committee decisions will not include the high ball contest will be allowed and the tackle will be allowed. So depending which secondary school game you're playing, depends what laws you're going to be having. Good luck referees remembering that. I can see plenty of things being blown when you're not sure what laws you're supposed to be applying. So again, I've no problems with any of these rules individually. It's the mix and match problem, and you're going to hear that now when we talk about the club rugby. So senior club rugby then again has got 4 laws. They've got the various the field size difference again, which we'll ignore, but they've got the same one around scrums about resetting, and that the original team gets to choose either a uncontested scrum or a free kick. They've also got the same one around the offside at scrum, that the scrum half can't go past the tunnel. They do not. They are allowed to contest balls in the air and jump, but they have an extra one here, which is a 1.5 meter maximum push, unless within 5 meters of the goal line. Free kick going to the team that had the scrum put in if it goes further than 1.5 meters. Again, when at club rugby, you can get some very differently powered scrums, so restricting that, I understand, from a safety point of view, is not a bad move. What really does, so again, it's another one that I don't have a major problem with. What I do have a problem with, though, is why do we have only allowed 1.5 meter pushing in club rugby, but you can push for 20 meters in secondary school rugby? Again, referees that do first 15 will also do club rugby, and they're being asked to remember which set of laws they're supposed to be refereeing in each game. I just think it's harsh on the referees to be playing pick and mix with these laws rather than sort of having all the laws similar and basically just reducing one off, rather than adding and taking away, depending what competition they're refereeing.
Yeah, look, I agree, and look, I don't want to comment too much in it because I was sort of involved in this whole process as far as the sternum tackle and the tummy tackle goes. But I agree in principle. I think it's just complicating matters as opposed to simplifying it. And this whole driving a scrum 1.5 meters, this was actually tried at secondary school under 19, Colesville, I beg your pardon, by IRB when it used to be International Rugby Board back in the mid-90s. They tried it for a couple of years, and this was all to do with younger players breaking necks and having significant neck injuries around the scrum. But again, once things kind of dissolve away, they go back to the usual setting. That's what I have found out with all these, various rules. One thing I have to say is I'm genuinely happy about the tackle height. One thing I am not happy is, as you rightly said, that depending on what is the association. So, for example, the Auckland 1A, which is an independent organization and a power to itself, and it's a highly influential body. Chances are they're not going to take any of these rules on board because most of those coaches, they have careers and they're solely judged on the W, and they will do whatever it takes. And I'm not going to go into details because I've got a good cross section into who does what. They'll just probably scoff at this whole sternum tackle thing. Unless there is a proper resolution from World Rugby and they change the law book, ain't going to happen. And particularly, there are some players in the Auckland competition who are experts, maestros at contesting the aerial high ball. So they're not going to wanting to give up a critical advantage. So it'll be very interesting to see. But all in all, I think you just can't have compartments A and C for one comp, B, D, X, Y. It's just got to be A, B, C. Everyone does this. And what we're actually going to see is two different sets of rules for the professional game and for the community or amateur game, which in my view is actually very, very dangerous.
Well, I actually think, I think with the way that we've seen the strength and conditioning that professional players can do that you don't see in a lot of the community game, I think they do need a different set of rules.
Paul, I disagree. What I see is from a coach educator and a coach developer point of view, one of the biggest questions I get asked, particularly at coach educator workshops, is why are you trying to preach safe tackle with myself and my kids? But then when we look at what the professional game is doing and the kids keep asking me, well, coach, you want me to do this? But we had so and so on the weekend do this, and they just got a warning. Why? So this is forever going to be where the issue is, and we are actually seeing some of those transitions happening at a very early age, which is actively being coached. So the whole theory behind it is, look, it's okay, try it at the game, so long as it doesn't disadvantage us too much. They're actually willing to risk pushing the envelope. And this is where the problem is. So in my view, I think you got to simplify the game. Everyone plays the same set of rules. It's going to be so much easier to transition. But what's actually happening is rugby is becoming more and more complicated. All these acronyms and test rules and blah blah blah. The two biggest stakeholders in the game who are actually becoming very disenfranchised are, one, the referees, and number two, the fans. Well, you saw what happened with this whole Jordie Barrett red card. The game was more divisive than ever. So it just goes to show, because there isn't clarity and simple education amongst one of the key stakeholders of the game, which are the spectators, this is only going to cause even more chaos. So we'll wait and see how things transpire. I'm forever hopeful, but the proof will be in the pudding.
And I've got to agree with you. The law book needs revisiting from scratch, and I think we're seeing, it's something that we've been talking about for a while, but we're seeing more and more voices talk about it now. So Nigel Yeldon came out with a tweet, I think yesterday, saying, look, why don't they go through the law book line by line? I think they should just throw away the law book and start again, and start from scratch and make it as simple as possible. We've seen Steve Hansen, I think it was, who was it, Steve Hansen or Ian Foster? One of the two came out. Sorry, it was Steve Hansen came out and said
Steve Hansen, yeah,
that
Sir Steve Hansen,
that again, that he should be, that they needed to simplify the laws. It was too complex, and yeah, it is. And the people who, I mean, there was a press conference which I wasn't invited to, but seeing comments on Twitter where they explained, where basically it was a press conference to explain to the media basically how they argued Jordie's position. And one of the things they made very clear was that they did not blame the referee for making the call. And it's kind of, okay, you don't blame the referee, but you think the call was wrong. Then where's the blame lie? Well, the blame lies with the laws, and that they're too complex now for anybody to referee. You can't watch everything. You can't. There are so many different things supposed to be not allowed at the same time that there just aren't enough eyes to watch everything, unless you go NFL style with with basically refereeing teams of about 8 or 9 players. So to me, that's the game is just becoming too complex, too confusing, and we do need a law overhaul.
So that's a really good example, Paul. I mean, the high ball. So next year in New Zealand, it's only the senior competitions who can have a contest in. It's what I call attacking the ball in the air, the aerial contest. It's allowed. Everyone else isn't. So most of the fans who are playing the community game, because keep in mind, the elite competition is less than 2% of all rugby playing population. So it's going to cause even more confusion. And if we have a repeat of Jordie Barrett, who actively sticks his leg out, we're going to have more similar situations. So
club rugby is allowed to do high ball contests. Secondary school rugby,
senior competitions. That's it. Club rugby senior competition only. Everything below secondary school, no contesting the high ball. There are going to be some teething issues. And
there always is.
And particularly 2024, 2023, 2024, everyone who's leaving that secondary school space, who's going to miss a year of not having to jump in straight into a competition where they're going to expect it to be. That's going to be quite interesting. So we'll just have to wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see. And as I say, we're obviously we have a disagreement here as to I think the professional game and the amateur game is moving apart, and therefore I think we need separate laws for them to keep them safe. You obviously feel different, that we should have the same set of laws across the park. I guess in New Zealand it's harder than in Europe, right? In Europe, you either play for a professional team or an amateur team. In New Zealand, we have players who play Super Rugby that sometimes go and play club rugby. Not very often, but they do. We have players then from Super Rugby who go to Mitre 10 Cup, who mix with club rugby players. So you're mixing your professional, semi-professional, amateur players up all the time. Whereas in Europe, you either are a member of Leicester Tigers and play for them all year, or you play for your local rugby club, whatever that's called, local Globetrotters or Wanderers, and there isn't that movement. There isn't that movement up and down and mixing of the players. So it's easier over there to segregate the game. Here in New Zealand, it's much harder to do so. Cool. Thank you very much for joining me for Lockdown Beers, and again, well done the 09. Keep it up, folks. Keep following the rules. We will keep helping you through lockdown and giving you something to unwind with at the end of the day and to entertain you at 5 p.m. whilst you're in level 4. We will do this probably will take Sunday off, to be honest with you, for the Lockdown Beers because of the rugby in the evening, and I've also got my daughters this weekend. But we will continue this every day at 5 p.m. Bring you the latest basic rugby news and have a chat. Thanks, Boa.
Very welcome, everyone. Please be safe and enjoy lockdown.
Catch you all tomorrow.